Hi, thank you everybody for coming to our meeting today. This is a special education eligibility meeting for Carmen. I'm going to start off with introductions. Yes, my name is Michelle. I am the principal and I'm going to be facilitating this meeting. So let's start off with Carmen's mother.
Hi, I'm Ellen. I'm Carmen's mother and I know a few of you.
I'm Nicole, Carmen's classroom teacher.
I'm Jessica. I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, but I am the school psychologist and I got to work with Carmen.
Hi.
Hi, I am Laura and I'm currently her math interventionist.
And I'm Kim, and I'm a special education teacher here, and I also got to work with Carmen.
So thank you everybody. I've provided a packet of information for everybody so we can refer to as we're making our decisions and having our conversation. But I'd like to first start off by summarizing the conversation that we had at our referral meeting. So there was a referral meeting when we did make a decision that based on the information we had, there was a suspicion of a disability and we did move forward. But that meeting summary is in your packet. So at the referral meeting, we did talk about Carmen's areas of challenges. And at that point, both mom and the classroom teacher were concerned about how Carmen had been performing. When she was in the 4th grade, she was having some challenges in the winter and spring, and so we started to provide intervention. And then now that she's in the 5th grade, we are seeing some of those challenges continue. So at the meeting, we did talk about her scores on assessments from screening as well as her intervention data, and we looked at that. And we made some decisions that we felt that she was receiving comprehensive classroom instruction, and that we also felt that she had been receiving at least 2 periods of sufficiently intensive intervention, and that the gap between Carmen and her peers was not closing in the area of math. And we felt that there may be a disability that was impacting her ability to access the curriculum. So we determined that a comprehensive individual evaluation would give us the information that we needed. So based on that, we've asked individuals on this team to provide different portions so that we can answer some very specific questions. So today we'll be looking at some past data that we had for Carmen and looking at that with the lens of, does this information look like a student who has a disability as opposed to a student who's just not responding to an intervention? We've also asked for some additional information to be brought forward during this conversation. There was a question about her memory and processing ability, so we wanted to do a cognitive evaluation specifically to look at those particular issues. And we also wanted to look at some achievement testing in the area of math specifically because we wanted to know what Carmen's performance was compared to her peers in a norm referenced assessment. So based on that, we've all come back together and this is our meeting to determine the eligibility. So the first thing I'd like to do, starting this process, is to ask Mom to tell us some of the concerns that you have for Carmen and some things that you would like to see.
But I'm really concerned because I think she's getting discouraged and I don't know how to help her with the math. I wish I did and I try hard, but so I want her to be successful.
All right, so now we want to gather some background information on Carmen. I think, Jessica, you were able to pull some of that for us?
Yes, absolutely. So towards the tail end of 3rd grade that we first started to see some of her screening data suggested she was starting to fall a little bit behind. In 4th grade, that's where her teacher from last year, you may remember Susan, that she started to share with you that she was seeing some struggles there, and they did some extra screening and noted that she was really starting to kind of fall behind. Some of the state testing at that time suggested that she wasn't quite where her peers are, not exactly where we'd expect her to be, and so that's when we had our interventionist step in and start to do some extra work with Carmen.
So intervention started last year in the winter. First, actually, Susan, the classroom teacher, did some problem-solving strategies with her and worked in a small group for a while. And you may remember when we met in April, it was decided that she wasn't making that much progress based on the work with Susan and her small group and her classroom teacher, and so we actually added some of the computer-based intervention with the math facts, and this fall is when I started working with her, and we made the decision because she had lost ground over the summer, you know, as we sort of see, and so we placed her in a daily small group with Number Worlds, which is an evidence-based math program, really focusing on her number concepts. And so she did make some progress there, but slow still, and the gap between her and her 5th grade peers, who are really moving along in terms of the math world, she's not there. She has shown, we've been looking at her growth over those interventions, and we do see a little bit more gains with each of those interventions that we have added, but the rate hasn't, it isn't moving such that she is really making it up to where the 5th graders are, and so
her math progress is actually a reflection of both her general education math instruction as well as intervention. And her fall benchmark, we were seeing that she was both the concepts and application, so applying what she's learned, as well as math computation, so that more regular practice and how quick she is and how accurate, that she was below the 10th percentile in both. So this was not meeting our benchmark. And for her general education curriculum, she uses everyday math. And the curriculum, the resources we use are aligned to the Common Core standards. And again, we're just seeing a similar pattern that in our tests within the everyday math units, so showing how much she's mastered certain pockets, you can see the pattern of 55%, 60%, 55%, just generally suggesting over again that we need to do something more to support her.
So if you wouldn't mind, Nicole, just sharing also some of the other assessment information you have on her, some of the statewide assessment scores, or any of the ranges for her screening assessments.
They were, she was below proficient. So we will try it again for this year, but that's the last data point that I have. And again, I did already share the screening, which was the less than the 10th percentile on both, and the math units.
No, I think that covers everything. I
Okay.
just want to try to capture everything. And then I know that Kim, we had asked you to look at some of her math abilities on achievement tests.
Looking at her skills in the math area, so there are 3 subtests that I would be looking at. Math facts fluency, which is that automaticity that Laura has shared about just knowing your addition, subtraction, multiplication facts really quickly, calculation skills, and then apply problems. And so Carmen struggled with calculation skills and math facts fluency. So those scores were in the below average range, while her applied problem score was actually average. So her overall score in the math area came out just at the cusp of the average range, the low area of the average. But when you look at her specific subtests in calculation and math facts fluency, those areas are where she struggled. And so this might indicate that she could use some additional help in that area, in that math calculation and the math facts fluency area.
So I want to talk just a little further about what we call the lack of sufficient progress in a response to intervention, and especially when we're talking about an evaluation for special education eligibility, we really want to look at the student's performance not only against his or her peers, so Carmen in reference to the peers in her intervention group and any of the norm reference assessments that have been given, but also against herself. So we call that an inter-individual framework. So her ability to progress when you compare her performance to what it looked like before an intervention occurred and then after different interventions have been presented.
You have here in front of you shares the different periods of intervention that she's had since last winter. And this year we have the period of baseline when she wasn't receiving any intervention. And notice here that we have a flat line in the sense that progress wasn't made, she wasn't increasing. And so this is based on her computation skills. This is her adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. And so last spring we had the small group intervention that her classroom teacher was providing. We see that she started to make slight progress, but not really. And remember, we met in April because she wasn't responding as we had hoped, and her line was really pretty similar to what it had been without intervention. And this is where we saw in the spring where we added that computer-based fluency intervention, and we see that there was definitely a jump, definitely a gain there, where we see the difference between when she was making kind of 0.1 digit, very few digits, right? Less, basically none. But then at this point in the spring, we see that she was making what, it's hard to count this, but half a digit a week, which, when it works out, that makes gains. Gains are not that pieces. And we see a similar pattern over here, but in fact, we made the decision to have a more intensive intervention this fall, with the number worlds being every day, evidence-based, very specific. And although she was responding in the sense that her performance on those unit tests in the number worlds was at 85%, so she was kind of getting the day-to-day number worlds intervention in that piece. But her progress rate continues to be very low in the sense that she's not making that many more digits. Very similar here, we looked at concepts and applications, so these are the word problems. And here we see a similar pattern in the fall last year, but here Number Worlds really does address more of the concepts and applications, and we see little gains, but not the gains that we would be hoping to see. So remember, we're looking at this in relation to Carmen herself. What are the trends that we're seeing as we added each of the interventions? So yes, we have the peers progress, and yes, we have our 5th grade aim line, but we're looking at this, we're looking at that intra-individual progress rate for Carmen. And with our intensity here, daily math intervention in a group of only 3, in addition to that very regular fact-based fluency, which she's getting 15 minutes in school, and in the logs that you're seeing 15 minutes at home, we're not seeing that much gain.
We also wanted to do some elements of cognitive assessment because we wanted to determine if there were any additional factors, particularly around memory, because that was what we were wondering about, to see if we could determine if there was an area that we needed to focus more on, and perhaps it would give us some information about some additional intervention as well.
I want to start with some different areas of this intelligence and explain them to you. Another piece that we look at is her visual spatial skills, and so that looks at reasoning with shapes and patterns and seeing how she does there. And in that area, she fell in the lower end of the average range. We also look at fluid reasoning, and that's her ability to apply concepts in that visual spatial realm. And in that one, we saw she did, again, that lower end of the average range, but still that's where she scored below where we'd expect her to. The visual portion of memory was harder than the auditory portion of memory. And so to that end, when we look at working memory, we think about those separately, and we're noticing that the visual working memory was harder. And so again, that's the place where we'd like to support her. The last piece that we look at when we're thinking about intelligence is processing speed. And this is related to the automaticity that Laura and Kim were talking about, how fast she's able to get some things done. What we saw here was just at that cusp of kind of the lower end of average range and below average. Takes her a little bit longer to do things. We're not seeing that she's making mistakes or that she's impulsive in this area, but that it takes her longer to solve some of these things and process it through. But we are noting that both on that memory and that speed with which she accomplishes some of her academic tasks, specifically math, it's a little bit longer, and we want to make sure that we give her the right interventions and the right supports because we're noting that personal weakness.
This doesn't sound to me that there's an underachievement because of a lack of instruction, lack of exact access to instruction in the area of reading or math. And so I think we can definitely rule that out as
She attends, the curriculum is delivered, and screening data shows it's been effective for most students.
I did observe Carmen in her 5th grade class with Nicole during math instruction. She was very engaged. She was an active participant in the classroom. It was during explicit instruction. There was a lot of math vocabulary instruction. She was paying attention.
Okay, so we've had a lot of conversation. We presented all of our information for Carmen's comprehensive and individual evaluation. So now we come to the part where we have to make a determination as to whether we think that there is a disability present that would qualify her for special education services. So I'm going to read this from the form that we're using to make sure that we've captured everything and we can make the best decision. So we'll be getting in contact with you. We'll be meeting again. We'll be developing her IEP and setting up the goals for her to meet with success.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.